We're going to make this traditional rose. It's a very delicate rose, and it's made in 3 different shades of flower paste, and together with its leaves I'll show you how, when it's made, how to assemble it into this little spray. To start off with, we need to make a centre for the rose, and to do this, first of all, I coloured some flower paste. It's been coloured with some peach paste colour, and I've got a darker shade, slightly medium shade, and a paler shade. And this darker shade is for the centre of the rose, and then graduating to a slightly lighter shade, and then to a pale shade on the outside. The first step in doing this is to take your darker shade, and we're going to make the centre for the rose. Now, if you intend to make more than one, it's advisable to make all your centres at the same time. And to do this, you will take a small piece of paste and roll it into a pea size little ball. Perhaps that's slightly too big, but now how you would make it all the same is to make them all the same size little balls, so that when you came to make your centre, that one's slightly smaller, so we wanted a little bit more for it, so as I say, make them all the same, slightly bigger. So if you wanted a dozen roses, then make a dozen centres. You can see here that I've covered my paste in cling film. Now, cling film is your best friend while you're making flowers, because the simple reason the paste will dry out extremely quickly, so everything you make has got to be covered. So I'm only going to use one of these little balls to make a centre, so the other one goes under the cling film. Just make sure it's wrapped up properly. Then you've got plenty of paste to use. Okay, we've got our piece-shaped piece of flower paste, and now with a little bit of corn flour, I'm going to make it into a cone. And that is the centre shape of your rose, the very centre. So now I'm going to take a wire, I'm going to make a hook on the end of the wire, and I'm going to dip it into my edible glue, which I've actually made out of gum arabic, although you can use egg white. But I would make sure that if you use egg white, it's beaten up very well and it's not stringy. Now I'm going to take my wire and I'm going to insert it into the end of my cone. And when I've got it into the end of my cone, I'm going to twist it slightly to make sure it will not come out. Reshape your cone so it looks as if it's the perfect shape. And then at the bottom, I take my tweezers and I'm going to close that up so there's absolutely no way that that will come out. I'm then going to make a hook on my wire, and here I actually have a hanger. Now you can use any sort of hanger you can get your hands on, really. Anything will be that allows you to hang it on. And this is most valuable. It was actually the inside tray of my microwave, but it's just perfect. Now, I've actually got a cone that I made earlier and I've left for 24 hours, and it is dry. It is very, very dry and hard. And this is essential, so you need to leave it until it really is dry right the way through. Now we've got the dry cone, the next stage is to make the petals and cut the petals, so we need to cut the petals out. I've got a couple of types of petal cutters here. Now, this is a plastic cutter, but to me, I think it's a little bit too round for the style of rose that I make. So, although it's very, very good, and I do often prefer a plastic cutter, because if your metal cutter isn't very good, it can after time go out of shape. So sometimes, I mean, I've had these a long time, sometimes these actually stay more perfect than these. But these cutters are very good. They're a very good quality. In this set there were 7 cutters, and for this rose I'm going to use the middle 3. So I will get rid of the outside 2, and I want this one, that one and that one, and the middle ones are far too small. So the first row that goes on our cone are going to be the small ones, so I want to make those in the dark paste the same as I made the centre. Again, remembering to keep your paste wrapped up, I'm going to put a little bit of corn flour on my board, and I'm going to roll this out, making sure it doesn't stick at all. Let's roll it fairly thinly. In this darker shade of paste we need to cut 6 small petals. Six. And that's your 6 small petals for the centre. Again, we're going to put our, I'm not going to use this anymore, so we'll put this back into our store in our cling film. In there, wrap it up very well. Because we don't want these to dry out while we're assembling them, I will put the small petals into the cling film and just leave one out to work on. Again, dust your hand with a little corn flour so it doesn't stick, and this wants to be just slightly softened round to the edge with the ball tool. So each one I'm going to soften slightly. It just makes it so that it doesn't look as if it's got a cut edge, which is most important when you're making these sugar flowers. Try and keep them as natural looking as possible. I mean, I've made them in 3 shades of paste because I think the shaded roses look very nice, but there's absolutely no need to do that. You can make it all one colour. So it's a matter of personal choice. So now I've got these ready, I'm going to take my little petal and I'm going to paint it with a little glue, and I'm going to start and put the petals around the centre cone. Now they need to be wound right across, just folded right across the top there. And then each one folds over the other as you go, until you've got all 6 attached. You can just see the top of that, only just that little top of the cone. It's really, the cone is to give you the shape. Just got 2 more to put on. And the centre cone piece represents the petals that actually haven't come out yet. So that's the very centre. Then just push them down onto the cone itself. And that's the very first part, and I'm going to pop it into my flower foam while I'm doing the next one. So in the next layer, we're going to use the middle shade of paste, and we want the middle size cutter. And again, a little corn flour on your board, a little on your paste. I'm going to roll it out very thinly. Just make sure that it doesn't stick. So we actually want 4 of this medium size cutter. Make sure the edges are cut cleanly. And the rest of your paste will go back into your storage. Three petals under your cling film here. Make sure they don't dry. And onto your hand, a little corn flour, and soften the edge of the petals to get rid of that cut look. Back into your cling film, around the edge. Now they're ready to mount onto your cone. Take a little glue and paint onto your petal. It's best to do it like that, and then it's not too much. You don't want too much glue onto it. And that goes to make the next set. So the centre was very, very close. These are just slightly opened up again. The next one overlapping the first. And they've just got that slightly more open angle to them. Just make sure you don't soak your paste with this glue though, because if you do, you'll find you've got to just it will be very soggy and very difficult to work. Third one, and the last one in that row. Again, a little glue. And for this one, when you've attached it, you really want to get a cocktail stick and lift that one slightly and tuck that one underneath. So it gives you that natural look. So that's the next row onto it. Just make sure it's the right shape. And that's the next row. And the last row is in the palest shade. And we need 5 petals cutting for that one. So again, work your paste to make sure it's nice and smooth. If you work it towards the centre, it means where you're going to roll keeps very smooth. It's like working pastry. If you're going to make some pastry, you'd make sure the bottom edge was smooth, and when you came to roll it, it would make a nice rolling. So I'm going to a little sticky, a bit more. To roll it out quite thinly. Quite thin. I can just about see the shade of my fingers through it, so it means it's quite thin enough. I'm going to cut out 6 of these larger. Oh, it came out, so it must be clean. Usually if they pop straight out, there's no residue of the side, and therefore it'll make a nice clean cut. Again, I'm going to put my paste in my store. Make sure it's wrapped up carefully. My petals will go into my cling film again. Now this time, I'm not going to do it on my hand, but I want them slightly more frilled, so I'm going to take the end of the paintbrush, which I've dipped my favourite paintbrush for rolling, into the glue, which I think I didn't really mean to, but I've been using the same paintbrush for years. It just happens to suit me. Make sure it's, and then roll it to soften the edges. And then you can pick it up, and with your ball tool you can just slightly indent the centre, so it's giving you that lovely petal shape. Very, very carefully put it in the cling film. You have to be careful you don't flatten it out. So again, we're going to, you can use a cocktail stick to do this, but the only thing is, if you're going to use a cocktail stick, please sand it first, because you'll find that cocktail sticks are not smooth. And just a standard wooden cocktail stick is full of bumps and ridges, and you'll find that it will make your petal very uneven. So that's number 2. And just slightly roll the centre. Don't do it very hard, but just slightly, so it gives it a pretty flute. And then give that slightly, it gives it a nice rose petal shape. I'm sure if you don't want to make your own glue, you can buy some ready-made glue, but it depends how good your source of flower making materials are where you live. Whether you can get hold of any or not. Or alternatively, you can send away for your materials. And the last one. You get used to the things that you use, and this paintbrush I think I've been using for about 20 years. It looks it, but it is just the right one, and I've never found one to replace it. So we're going to take the rose and our first petal, which again we're going to paint with a little glue. Try not to drop it as I did. And the first one goes on to your base. The next one, make sure you get them the right way up so that your flute is going outwards and the hollow bit is going around the rose. Next one on. You can see we're forming quite a pretty shape here now. Makes a very delicate rose. Again, paint in the end. If you really prefer at first, I would suggest that perhaps you let the first 2 rows dry before you try adding another one. You'll find perhaps it's much easier for you to do that way. I want to lift that one up. To add the second one, the last one onto it. It pops underneath that one. So there you formed. I need a little more glue on that one to stick it together to the last petal. And you've formed your rose. When you've done it, make sure the back of it is quite smooth, because you're going to put a calyx on it now, and if there's anything lower than that base, you'll find it's very difficult to put your calyx on. And then if you feel much more comfortable about leaving it to dry in between each row of petals, then that's fair enough. But I'd leave it for a few hours between, so it's quite stable. But make sure the base of it is always clean, so that you've got the base of the rose that's got nothing sticking out whatsoever. Just pushed it with my nail. Well, we made our rose, so now we want to make a calyx to go on the back of it. So we've got the little calyx that goes up the sides of the back of the rose, and also the seed pod. Now, put that down. To make this, we need to get some Calyx cutters. Again, there are quite a variety on the market, and it depends on your own preference, I think, which you use. I personally use these plastic ones, which of course, as I've said before, always keep their shape, so they're quite a good investment. And then I use a metal one because it just happens to be the size that I want for this, and there didn't seem to be any size between this one and the very small one, so again, personal preference. So we'll put these to one side, and I'm going to use this cutter. To make this Calyx, what we're going to do is we're going to get a cone of paste. The similar way we made the cone of paste for the centre of the rose. So I think that's might be a little big. Okay, so we roll it to a cone shape, just like that. And then the base, we're going to start and flatten out. It's a little warm today, so I need perhaps a little bit of extra corn flour than I would normally use if it wasn't so warm. The paste seems to react to humidity and heat, so we've got a little hat. I'm going to get my paintbrush. Now, if you prefer, you can use your cocktail stick, but again, you'll find tools to suit yourself, and I actually work far better with this one. And I'm going to roll out this, so in actual fact, it's quite thin. And you've got to have lots and lots of patience to make these flowers, so don't think that you're going to do them in 5 minutes, because this is the whole beauty of it. They take a long time to do, but they're well worthwhile. And that's sure. I'm going to pop that over the centre, and I'm going to cut it out. And again, run your finger along it so you get a completely clean cut. And peel away the excess and put it back in your store. And with the end of my brush, I'm going to just loosen it off. And we now have almost a calyx shape, but remember, we've got to make it so it's going to fit over the end of the rose. So I'm taking a dowel. I've got a dowel here, and I'm going to shape it into the centre so that I'm going to make almost a little well there, so that it's going to take the base of the rose, and I'm going to widen it out. Now, as I say, it's quite hot today, so the paste is a little bit sticky. But no matter, there's ways of doing it. And keep smoothing it until you've got it to the nice delicate shape. And what happens next is, if you've ever looked at a rose calyx, you'll find that very often, not every time, but very often, each branch of your calyx is split. I'm going to get a pair of scissors, and I'm going to cut down just slightly on each one. And the best way you can ever see where to do it and how it is to actually study a rose in your garden, or in a book if you haven't got roses in your garden. So the rose that we made, and this is why you don't want anything sticking down from your rose. And you're going to thread it through the centre, and I'm going to put a little glue on the base of that calyx and thread it over. Very, very carefully so you don't knock the pieces off. And then the bottom of it, just shape with your fingers to form that seed pod on the bottom. And you'll find that as the rose opens out, that actually curls over. It makes a very delicate little calyx. And then we're going to hang him upside down to dry. And now we need to make the leaf, or rather leaves that go with it. So this is the rose leaves, and to make these rose leaves we're going to use some cutters. Again, you find preferred cutters. The set of cutters that I have here actually has 3 different sizes of leaves and 3 veiners. So there's quite a good selection, and you can also get different makes have got different shapes. This has got a sharper edge to the leaf. But for this exercise I'm going to use these. In fact, I'm going to use the small one and the medium one because that's big enough for the project we're doing now. So they can go away. So I'll take these leaves. Now, to make a leaf, you will need again another small piece of paste. And make sure you cover the rest up. I can't emphasise that too much because when I first started I wasted so much paste because I forgot to cover it and I left it out and it dried, and you keep having to get new paste, and that's no good. And not only that, if you want the same shade of paste you have to keep colouring it, and you don't always get the same. So put some corn flour down and roll it slightly, and what we're going to do is I need to make a centre vein for my leaf, so I'm going to roll from the centre of it outwards. So centre the paste, roll it outwards and make it quite thin. In fact, I've got quite a large piece of paste here, so I won't need all that. If you can see, I'm leaving that ridge there. In fact, I'll get a knife and I'll cut some of it off because I don't need it all. There we go. You can make it quite fine. Now the centre vein is so that we can actually wire the leaf. We need to put a wire in the centre bit, so. And then the outside is quite fine and it was quite delicate. And that's, I think, just about ready. Get our leaf cutter, and I'm going to try to make sure that that vein is at the centre. So if I put it at the end, it's going up. Run your finger around the edge to make sure it's a clean cut. I'll put my surplus away. Your tool should go through it I can just slightly smooth that centre if I don't think it's neat enough. And what I've got to do is to take a 28 wire, and I'm going to make a hook in the top of that wire, just a tiny hook, and I'm going to dip that hook into my edible glue. Then I'm going to take the leaf and place that into the centre vein that I've left, and that's why we left that slightly raised piece. Now what we're going to do now is to take our veiner, and I'm going to press the back of the leaf onto it, so it's left a vein pattern, and then I'm going to press the front, but don't press it too hard, otherwise you'll flatten the back out. What you do now is, a leaf very rarely is perfectly flat, so you want to give a little bit of movement, so we're going to bend it slightly, and then perhaps if you have a look at rose leaves you'll see that they're slightly curled at the top. They may be flat, but that gives it a little bit of movement and a bit more interest to your spray when you come to assemble it. And then we'll have our flower foam, and we'll stick it into the flower foam to dry. Getting my F's all muddled up there. So what you want to do now is to make at least 3 small ones and 2 larger leaves, and that would be adequate for our spray. We've made our rose, and now of course we want to know what to do with it. And originally when you saw the little spray, it had got some leaves attached to it, and it was made ready to perhaps lay on the top of a cake. Now, the most important thing at the moment is to learn how to put flower tape around your stems. And not only is this done to make them the right colour, which it's nice to have a green stem, but sometimes you actually use a green wire, a green covered wire, which we have on this rose here. But unfortunately it's very slippery and it won't stay still while you're trying to assemble it. Now if we tape it with this green flower tape, it is actually sticky, but not to your fingers. It's sticky enough to stick to itself. And this is why it makes it much easier to assemble your sprays. So in actual fact, this leaf I'm using here has been made with an uncovered wire. So perhaps it's easier for you to see then that once I cover it, how easy it is to handle. So to do it, you want to get the end of your flower tape, pinch it together so it's actually quite firm, and then between your fingers you're going to roll it, and you will roll it down the stem. Push it up to the leaf base so it's really covered, and then you will roll it. It may take you a few times to actually get used to doing this, but eventually you'll find that it's quite easy to do. Again, we're going to fold it over the stem. I know it's very, very tiny, but you'll get used to doing it. And then roll it between your fingers and your thumb and pull the tape downwards so it's going down. So you're not literally rolling it in one place, but you're pulling it down as you're rolling, pulling it down with the other hand. And you'll find that when you want to assemble your little spray, that these will stick together, and it's such a benefit, because otherwise they all slip all over the place and it's very difficult. So we're rolling. We've made sure it started at the top by sliding it upwards, And again we're going to do this. Now I know that, as I said, we've got green tape, a green covered wire on our rose, but to make it much easier to assemble, I still, perhaps not so finely and so that every single bit of it's covered, but it is much easier to handle if there's some flower tape on it. First of all, we're going to assemble these leaves, and as you can see, I've made them into a 5-leaf spray, because I believe that roses are supposed to have 5 leaves that are together. If it's 7 leaves, it's what they call a sucker, so you have to cut those off. So we'll stick to the proper one. So I'm going to put these 3 leaves together. Now if you see what I mean, it's much easier to handle because they are, to a certain extent, they will stay together while you're taping them. And that is why we put the tape onto it. So I'm going to put those together to make that top spray. And again, you've learnt to put the tape on, so you put the tape down the stem, and then I'm going to add a larger leaf to this side, and just put a tiny bit of tape on it, and of course it thickens the stem and makes it more natural. And that's the other leaf there. Again, pinch it together so it's really stable, and then start to roll and adjust your leaves to suit. You can twist them around like that, and then we take our rose, which we've already put the tape onto, and we're going to tape the leaves to the rose stem. And there you are, you've got a nice little spray. You can put 1 or 2 of these onto a cake. It makes a very pretty little spray. Well, just a word about this flower tape. Now, it comes on a roll, and you can get various colours, pale greens and reds and whites and browns, and it's very, very useful to have because it's very important with flower making. And if you want just if you want a thicker one, if you're making a bigger flower, just to give you an idea that it will cut quite easily. So what you would do is literally fold it around your fingers like that, and you will fold it in 2, and you can just cut it with a pair of scissors. So if you've got a larger flower, you might want to use half tape, or even bigger still, a whole tape. It depends what you're actually making. But this little gadget is really quite good, and I think you can get it anywhere, and especially from florist suppliers. Now inside there's actually 3 razor blades. Looks very dangerous, but it's okay. It's well secured. And you can renew them when they get blunt, so that's why I liked it, because it wasn't a tool that was going to wear out. And what you can do is take a little bit of green or whatever colour flower tape, and you thread it through the back, okay, right through. I'll let it go right through because I don't want to put my fingers on the razor blades. And then you shut it down and pull it, and there you have some fine tape for when you want to do your fine flowers. It's good. It's like magic.